dear friends, dear conference survivors. This has been an exciting and very productive day. Do you agree? Who has liked the conference most? Did you like the conference, gentlemen? Bon appetit.
Okay, this is not a good question because I wasn't here.
But you were here yesterday.
Yes, I just arrived from that moment.
So we are very happy that you made it here tonight.
Yes, I'm so happy.
And as we know, where the conference almost ends, the policy implementation and the new action usually begins. And I'm convinced that this session will represent a perfect bridge between the conference and the new action. I hope you are not too tired to enjoy the conference and enjoy this last session, and you are comfortably seated, and you will be an amazing audience. As you can see in the back, for your patience, for your active participation, and for your lasting interest, we have prepared some treats for you. First, some nice drinks, then some refreshments, and also some food for thought. And since you might be missing out on an after-work drink with your friends or colleagues, you are very welcome to participate actively in this debate, to ask questions anytime you want. Just raise your hands. This is nothing formal. Just when you feel that you need to express your opinion or to ask a question, please raise your hand and we will be there with you with the microphone. Can we see where's the mic for the... Excellent. So if somebody needs to ask a question, yes, sir, the mic is very close to you, so now you would be heard much better than when I asked you the question. Before introducing to you our panelists, let me make one technical remark. At this point, all ties, jackets, or any uncomfortable clothing can be removed. Questions can be asked at any time, as I said, and controversial comments are also quite welcome. Today we have heard a lot about the European Union and its response to the crisis. But what we haven't heard a lot today was how the individual member states have been dealing with the crisis, how the crisis has impacted on them, and that's why we are here today at this last final policy session called Policy Cocktail. So we have, as I said, like it's informal, and we have like not real cocktails, but we have some drinks for your enjoyment. So please help yourself if you haven't done so. But I think that you were quite thirsty and hungry because all of you were first in the back of the room. So now I'm quite happy that you are coming closer to us. And that's what we want to achieve, actually, to bring the European Union closer to its citizens. So the session is based around the book. Quite unusual, because the previous sessions were based around the ideas only, which haven't been maybe mapped in the papers, but now this session is based around the book, and the book is dealing with managing the financial and economic crisis in Europe, and the book will be soon published. So we are the first ones who can actually listen something about the actual book and about the ideas which are expressed in the book. I have here 4 great experts on the crisis and on the measures that were taken and on the action, and 4 of them are coming from different member states. On my right hand next to me is Vít Novotný, surprisingly quite pro-European Czech person. Next to him is the Slovak countryman Martin Valentovič. Then next to him we have a Greek gentleman from Mr. Pantelis Klias, and then the last but not least, the German gentleman from the German gentleman Lothar Funk. So let me get back to Vít. He's a senior research officer at the Center for European Studies. The Center for European Studies is a Brussels-based political foundation, but not only that. It is also the main partner of this conference and the co-organizer of this final policy session. Vít has worked as a researcher and a consultant in the university, private, public, and not-profit sectors. And he has been dealing for quite some years with the EU structural funds and the labor market. But more importantly, and more related to this final policy session, he is the editor of the book, which will be soon published, And the book is, I don't know the exact title, I think it's still under the discussion, but maybe Vid will tell us in a bit slightly more about that. Next to it, as I mentioned, is Martin Valentovic. Martin is a Slovak analyst of the economic think tank MESA 10. And he has written a number of different publications on development on local, regional, and state level. He has made different contributions to the report on the state of the society in Slovakia. And he has written about economic, judicial, and institutional reforms. He also touched on the consequences of the Slovak membership in the Economic and Monetary Union, and has written also quite significantly on the current financial crisis. I'm also very happy to have here, as I mentioned before, Pantelis Klias, who is a professor of international political economy at the Department of Political Science at the University of Peloponnese. And he's also the head of the Academic Council of the Konstantinos Karamanlis Institute for Democracy. His research interests include institutions, state and markets, global governance, political and economic relations, civil society, development, and so on. And as I said before, last but not least, we have here the German gentleman, the professor of the economics and international economic relations at the University of Applied Sciences. And Professor Lothar Funk is also the fellow at the Cologne Institute for Economic Research and visiting fellow at the Institute for German Studies at the University of Birmingham. He's also a member of the Council of Economic Advisors of the Political Foundation, of the German Political Foundation, Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Berlin, and co-editor of the German Review on Social Policy. So thank you very much that you have made it here, all four, and I think I could not have hoped for a better composition of the panel. So let me get back to you. There is this book which is coming very soon, and we are all excited to read it. But maybe you can tell us more about the book. Why has the Center for European Studies decided to write such a book? Hasn't there been written enough about the crisis? And basically tell us why should we all read it?
All right, thanks. Thanks for this opportunity, Katarina and the organizers. Let me introduce the CS a little bit. We are the political foundation of the European People's Party, as was already said, but we have actually precisely 26 member foundations in different member states. And we organize research projects, common research projects with our foundations. The usual mechanism is that the particular foundation appoints an author to write on the given topic. The project we're talking about today is the second in a row. The first one concerned immigration and integration, and that book was published earlier this year. Well, it was 2013, so last year actually. It was 2012, January 2012. And the second book is going to be named From Reform to Growth, Managing the Economic Crisis in Europe. Why this book? It often seems in debates about the economic and financial crisis that we concentrate on solutions at the European level, and that we don't pay enough attention to what's happening at the member state level. And the CS is in an ideal position to address this gap, because we have our member foundations who have experts on the situation in their countries. So a decision has been made to cover the development of the economic and financial crisis and debt crisis between 2007 up until 2012, and to provide a reflection of how different governments have dealt with the crisis and what we can learn from their responses, to see what the differences have been and what the commonalities have been, and whether we can provide recommendations to policymakers at the member state level as well as at the EU level given the variety and the richness of evidence that has been collected from the different countries. This book is now in final stage of production. We now almost have a final manuscript, and it will be published by the end of May by a Dutch publisher called Eburon. It is 19 country chapters, one region chapter, which covers Catalonia, and one chapter that covers the European Union, and another chapter which provides a political perspective. It's been written by an MEP from the European People's Party's group in the European Parliament. This book takes an openly center-right view, so we do not hide our assumptions, which are center-right. Nevertheless, even within that, there are many approaches, and that can be seen in the chapters as they have been submitted. And even within this, there's not one center-right view, but it's visible from the text that people have different ideas about an ideal approach to handle the crisis. Just one or 2 points. There's a final synthesis in the book which has been written by myself and 5 other colleagues at the CES. It's almost finished now. Just to explain, the whole book has been a collective effort. Although I'm the editor, I had a number of colleagues helping me throughout. Without them, the book would not be complete. I think that's probably enough at this stage.
So, and you mentioned that this is like the account of the events that took place between 2007 and 2012, right?
Yes.
But is it just a retrospective account of the events and the measures taken, or has the book something to say for the future? Are there any suggestions for policy action and future scenarios, for example?
Indeed, it's a retrospective book, and the purpose of that is to learn lessons from the past 5 years. That is the purpose. However, we are drawing lessons, and based on those lessons, we are trying to provide recommendations. So it's not a purely retrospective exercise. It's also a forward-looking one. And perhaps we can talk about the lessons and the recommendations as the discussion progresses.
Excellent. So thank you very much. I will still stay with you. And I think that you are maybe the best suited person to ask about, to give us a little bit of an overview of how the crisis has impacted the different member states, because you were the editor, you are collecting also all the chapters, you were commenting on them. So maybe you can tell us more about what was the effect of the crisis on the member states, and whether there have been any findings within the book which made you quite surprised, for example.
I would say actually yes. As we know, and everybody knows, the whole crisis started in the US. Nevertheless, it revealed the weaknesses of European economies. And the different chapters show that different countries have been prepared to that crisis to a different degree. For example, some countries did not really have a crisis, and I would name 3. Poland, Malta, and Norway, and their GDP either didn't stop growing, or it fell only a little bit, but then quickly recovered. So for me, that was a surprise, and this is not what I was expecting, because I didn't follow all the details before I started working on the project. Other countries were not prepared, but they seem to have got their act together relatively quickly within 2 or 3 years, and that's the majority of the countries in the book. And then there are countries which were forced, that's perhaps the third group, which were forced into taking measures either by the markets or by international lenders such as the European Union, IMF, and so on. So there's definitely a different degree to which countries were prepared or not prepared for handling the crisis. And the economic figures shows that in terms of the GDP growth, unemployment, borrowing costs, and so on.
So thank you very much. I will now move to another speaker of this panel, which is like a little bit further away from me, and it's our Greek panelist. I will move to the most complicated case, the country which was maybe the least prepared, and the bigger troublemaker. And if you allow me for this, because it's a rather informal session, I will start in slightly weird way. I will tell you a very brief story, which will then result in a question. And very recently, I have been at a conference and I heard a frog story. And since then, it just often can be applied to different causes. And now I find that like it can be maybe applied to the Greek case. Do you know, Pantelis, that if you throw a frog into the cold water and you put the stove on, the frog will boil to death. But if you put the frog into the hot water, the frog will actually jump out. And that somehow reminds me of the crease, that the crease was put into this cold water and was slowly boiling, and it nearly was placed to death. So what I have a little bit of the feeling is that Greece has more deeply rooted causes than one would assume of the crisis. And these stem from very long past, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, about the causes, and maybe then also like about the whole impact of the crisis on your country, which was quite tremendous.
Okay, is it okay with the microphone?
Is the microphone?
Okay.
Can you hear?
So, the most complicated. Okay? Fine. So, well, first of all, I would also like to thank the organizers for providing us the opportunity to be here and share with you I should say, our point of view probably, and also, well, first to clarify some of the issues that you have already raised, and probably some of the issues raised by daily newspapers, media, and all those means of information diffusion. And I suppose that you have been reading about Greece the last 2.5 years quite extensively and quite, in a quite tentative way. And for sure, as far as I understand, or as far as we understand, there has been a quite negative, until lately, there has been a quite negative opinion about the Greek reaction in the crisis. Well, first of all, this gives me your introduction gives me the opportunity to clarify one or two basic things. I should say that, A, the Greek crisis is not a Greek crisis alone. It seems to be also a crisis of the Eurozone. And one should go back some years ago and really see the criteria for entering the Eurozone and the extent that the Eurozone was really properly applying economic criteria as it was supposed to do so. Eventually, there has been a series of decisions within the Eurozone that really met political criteria instead of the pure economic ones that initially was the case. For sure, what I want to say is not the fact that the Eurozone did a mistake to accept Greece in the Eurozone, simply because if it was the case, then the Eurozone should not have accepted any member state but Luxembourg alone. Since Luxembourg those days was the only member state that was really satisfying the Eurozone criteria. Eventually, one has to clearly think what are the consequences, what have been the consequences on the quality of the process that has been applied throughout the years within the Eurozone itself. Eventually, there has been, in other words, an awkward cell within which the Greek economy should really work within. And if I go to the second point then, the second point in this, in my brief reaction, okay, thank you. Okay, now things become complicated. I think the Greek crisis will be resolved, but this stuff, no.
We can hear you.
I can continue, no worries.
Yes, I think you can continue.
Okay. No, now it will disappear, but anyway. Okay. The second point that I would like to raise is the fact that we initially considered the, well, then we have an awkward Eurozone environment. Secondly, the other stuff was the fact that within this awkward Eurozone environment, we also have an international global crisis that really accentuated the negatively affected the Greek economy as soon as the problem appeared. So in other words, it created such kind of dynamics that were really was really very, very difficult for the successive Greek governments to put things under a central control. So in other words, we have two external variations that seem to be quite important. Then, if I go to the other side of the coin, then we have to see the kind of stuff that we were facing in the country itself. And here we have our own challenges. If you see the crisis until 2009, 2008, let's say, and half 2009, then from the numerical point of view, you will understand that the Greek government was coping with the crisis. I don't say that it was coping in a satisfactory way, but at least it was coping. Until 2008, it was clear that there would be problems, and there were certain measures that were adopted by the Karamanlis government those days. In 2009, things then, together with being actuated by the international global crisis, then things started to become to be even more difficult, and it was more obvious that the situation would be accentuated very, very fast. Eventually, it was a clear-cut time position of the center-right government in Greece in September 2009, when Karamanlis asked for a fresh for the people's vote. And there we had a very sharp contradiction among the two main opponents those days. That was PASOK, the center-left party, led by George Papandreou, and from the other side, the right-center party, Nea Demokratia, led by Kostas Karamanlis. And of course, as we very well know, then PASOK those days really had a vigorous victory over Nea Demokratia by 11%. It was very clear those days, it was not clear at all those days what would follow, simply because the then PASOK declarations were not connected at all with the ways that the crisis or the coming crisis would be really faced, and what kind of measures would be undertaken. And then, of course, we have all the other issues that you very well know, and the developments that we are now facing after 2010. If we see, so in other words, what I want to say is that the absolute numerical, let's say, view of the situation does not really reflect the real roots and causes of the Greek crisis. Then we have to go back, and this is my fourth point, in the 1980s. And then you will see a consecutive series of political measures that in reality did not in reality fail, let's say, to tackle with the challenges that the country was facing. And I would dare to say that the level of political development in Greece did not really coincide with the level of economic development in Greece. And in other words, in order for somebody to completely comprehend the nature of the Greek crisis, besides the two major, and I really mean it, two major external variations, then which are the awkward Eurozone environment, the international crisis which really accentuated the processes, then you have to come into the internal political and institutional environment and the level of political development in Greece, which really did not coincide with the level of economic development, economic growth in Greece. And then, and here I will end my short introduction, if you go to the nature of this economic growth, then somebody will easily identify some misleading figures. And for example, you will see that from year 2000 until 2009, you will see a lot of, let's say, a quite substantial economic growth in terms of GDP's growth, which is very much due to fresh contribution, cash contribution in the country from two main sources. One source has been the EU structural funds, and the second source has been the public investment program, mainly to fund the Olympic Games. Eventually, you will see that the growth has not really been based on the diversification and probably the deepening of specific, let's say, of the productive basis in Greece, and the exploitation and the usage of our comparative advantages, because we really have a series of economic sectors with real comparative advantages, but let's say on artificial paths of creating growth. So when the crisis came, we were really unprepared, both at the level of the political elite, and it is very obvious by the fact that the latest PASOK government was elected not on the basis of any kind of declarations on how to deal with the crisis. On the contrary, business as usual. And on the other hand, at the level of society, and this is where the challenge is today.
So, but are you more prepared today?
Sorry?
Are you more prepared today?
I think that a lot has been done by Samaras government since June 2012. I think that people are now at least more mature in terms, and the political elite is more mature, independently from whether somebody agrees or disagrees or have a different opinion of what is going on, or other, let's say, kind of mixture of policies. You know, people are talking every day about the crisis in Greece. But at least what I can easily say is that society now and the political elite is much more mature than it was 3 years ago to really face the impact of the crisis, and of course to adopt the necessary political and economic measures in order to go through the crisis.
So this is the good news in some bad news, right? And the situation is serious, but not really hopeless. Yeah. And I will get back to you after I speak to some other panelists at this panel about with some other questions. But let me now. There's a question in the audience. So please, gentlemen, if you can introduce yourself and
sure.
ask a question or make a comment.
My name is Andrej Matišak. I'm deputy head of foreign desk in David Pravda, Slovakia. Is really the Greece public more mature? If I look at the polls and see Gordon Down, or I would say Syriza, it's a populist party in my point of view. So is it really more mature? Is it really more prepared to to have this, to go through those probably necessary austerity measures? Do you really believe it in?
Well, first of all, I would easily turn the question to you, and I would ask you if any kind of public would be more mature to accept austerity. The level of maturity is not connected with the level of somebody's willingness to accept maturity. And here I must really say that the Greek public has made a lot of sacrifices. The last 2.5, I will be very brief, the last 2.5 years. And those sacrifices, I'm really glad that have been recognized by our partners in the European Union. And of course, Syriza, which is, for those who don't know, is the main now opposition leftist party, is very close to the polls with Nea Demokratia. But it is also very interesting the fact that although there has been a series of quite harsh measures, even today, Syriza is not in front of the polls. And Nea Demokratia, together with Syriza, they are almost in equal terms. And it's very interesting the fact that the other two members of the coalition, of the government coalition, because Greek government now is a three-party coalition, meaning PASOK and Democratic Left, they also keep their forces. So in other words, it seems that at least at the level of the polls, the government structure is vivid and stable.
So if there are no questions from the audience at this point of time, I will move to Professor Lothar Funk, and I will ask him whether he can share with us how the crisis has been translated to the German country situation. And then I saw that there was the microphone moved to another person. So, like before you just go ahead with your answer, like, can you ask the question?
Okay, just one question. We have realized that one of the most serious problems within this crisis is the unemployment, and especially the unemployment of the young people. So what's the idea? I know the problem is extremely complex, but anyway, what's the idea how to try to solve it?
If I just may jump into this, we will get to unemployment in maybe second or third question quite briefly. You can answer maybe in your second intervention on the how the government dealt with the crisis and what was the unemployment. If you can wait 5 minutes, so yeah. Please, yeah. So if you can tell us how has the crisis translated into the German situation? We heard it was very serious in Greece. You had some problems as well, but it hasn't been of that scale. So you often had also to serve as a Euro saver. But I'm more asking about the real situation in Germany.
Yes. But first of all, let me just mention the good news with regard to Greece. According to the OECD published last week, that the pace of reforms has been particularly high in euro area countries under financial assistance programs or direct market pressures, as opposed to Germany. So in Germany, we seem to see some complacency, but that may be also related to the big efforts that Germany has to deal with in order to change the structure of the euro. However, one may say that Germany has been turned upside down in the last decade, I would say. So during the period 1995 to 2004, Germany was at the end of the economic growth league in the European Union. It was, you really had to turn upside down the league if you want to see Germany at the first place, where Germany maybe wants to be. But really big efforts had been needed to change that situation, and Germany was less than 10 years ago called the sick man of Europe. And now we are called something like a hegemon, a country that tries to push other countries to pursue structural reforms. And so things have changed completely. We are talking, or we have been talking about a new German economic miracle, labor market miracle, as opposed to the crisis that we have faced. And so the situation is completely different compared to Greece. Indeed, after the shock effects of having really low growth and rising unemployment for a long period, for more than 30 years, rising structural unemployment in West Germany and Germany as a whole, the things have changed completely since around 2005-2006. After the implementation of structural reforms, changes in unemployment aid, as well as new forms of atypical employment, more temporary work, more part-time work, etc., new incentives to move into the labor market. On the one hand, we increased employment creation, and on the other hand, we faced a severe situation after having increased economic growth after the reforms for 2 to 3 years. We had the lowest economic growth and a negative economic growth rate of minus 5.1% in the crisis year 2009. But actually, we only faced a V-shaped recession. So moving down very strongly, but moving up afterwards quite quickly. Meaning that in 2010, the real GDP growth was again plus 4.2%, and in 2011, 3.0%. At the same time, prices stayed flat, so inflation rates at around 0.3 in the crisis year percent, but normally 1 to 2%. And the unemployment rate moved down from roughly 9% in 2007 to, in 2011, less than 6%. In the crisis year, 2009, it moved up by 0.3% and then moved further down. So Germany was affected, especially in terms of export production. And that meant that firms that have been very profitable before the crisis have been mainly affected. And this translated into rather positive developments in many indicators. So looking at or setting 2,800%, we had only transitory shocks on several important economic indicators. Only real investment has fallen in the longer term, but all the other indicators were back in 2010, 2011 at the old level. So we were rather differently affected compared to Greece and a few other countries. And if I may go on, there are probably 3 reasons why that situation proved relatively positive in Germany. And the 3 reasons are that fundamentals were quite okay in Germany. Secondly, that economic policy was rather adequate. And finally, good luck in Germany. So why were the fundamentals quite okay? There was no bubble in the real estate, as opposed to many of the countries that are now in crisis, like Spain. There was no private sector leveraging as a result of the former low growth experience and maybe special incentives in Germany not to have too high loans. That seemed to be quite okay. At the same time, resulting from the former problems in Germany, the corporate sector has self-reformed quite a lot, despite of the fact that there have been not many structural reforms until 2003. Actually, the situation became worse under the red-green government, so the center-left government in the early years 1998 to 2003, because they re-regulated many issues, goods market, labor market. Afterwards, they changed their mind completely, pushed by the center-right opposition parties quite a lot. And then they turned everything upside down with the labor market reforms and liberalization of shop opening hours and some product market reforms. That's why I call my chapter Structural Reforms Can Work, as the German example demonstrates. And moving back to the corporate sector, I mean, Slovakia is a country that profits from the situation because the name of the game in Germany was outsourcing, offshoring, and restructuring. The German landscape was characterized since 2002, 2003, when I worked for the Employers Institute in Cologne, by a situation that quite a few multinationals made threats to relocate production outside of Germany. Partly because of the opening up of globalization, it was possible to move parts of the supply chain towards other countries, especially towards Eastern Europe, with much lower wage costs, but at the same time, relatively high productivity because of good education levels and so on. And here Germany did have an advantage compared to some other European countries, and that still works quite well for Germany as well as for countries that are in the supply chain. However, when Germany catches a cold, the other countries get real problems, like as you see in Slovakia. But if Germany is doing well, also the countries that benefit from collaboration with Germany, with the export supply, for example, do quite well.
Lothar, you mentioned there Slovakia. So if I may just jump in and ask our Slovak countrymen to maybe also respond to your couple of phrases on Slovakia, and also to look a little bit back on the roots of the crisis in Slovakia, and to say how like what impact crisis had on Slovakia. Because, like, as we all know, like you mentioned in your intervention, that Germany was called the sick man of Europe. Like before we joined the EU, we were called the black hole of Europe, and then like we got to be called Tatra tiger, and then the crisis hit, and prior to the crisis, we were still like very much like kicking and like having like very high growth rates and GDP rates, etc. So how the crisis has reflected, how the crisis has endangered this Tatra tiger model, which was a model for like many other countries. If you can like comment on that.
The mechanism was very, very simple. As you mentioned before the crisis, the Slovakia was one of the fastest growing country, one of the fastest growing economy. Just to imagine, in the period of 2000-2008, its GDP almost doubled, which is a huge number. For example, in real terms, during that time, it increased by 61%, while the average GDP in EU increased only 17%. There was one thing. Another thing was that before the crisis, the Slovak banking sector was healthy. It was the result of reform which were made 10 years ago. It was able to generate profits, but nevertheless, the crisis hit the country. So the question is why Slovakia had a crisis. It is simple, because the primary factor of this huge economic growth was driven by foreign investment inflow. These were mainly the international corporations which were oriented to export. And as a result, the Slovakia was very open. At the beginning of the crisis, the level of export represented almost 90% of GDP. And that's why for example, Germany was one of the biggest partner, and after the recessions in Germany and in other partners, it influenced the economy of Slovakia. So this is in hand. And maybe you can ask questions.
Right, so
about the reactions. You said that I would react.
You can react like right now, or yeah. Mm.
So you say it again.
I just mentioned that we have this collaboration on this level, which is, in my view, positive for both sides. But one may discuss that. It depends very much on a positive environment around Germany. Or in the rest of the world. I mean, the position of Germany, one has to mention, is based on economic growth outside of the Eurozone and outside of Europe. So Germany did very well because of the emerging economies outside of Europe did very well despite of the crisis we have seen. And Germany removed exports out of the Eurozone towards China especially. Where Germany is doing quite well, but that helps countries like Slovakia if Germany moves to countries outside of the Eurozone. So the Eurozone has become less important for Germany than in former times, which may pose a risk in a sense for the other countries, but on the other hand may also help other countries because of the generated growth in countries that are part of the supply chain in Germany.
We have one question also from the audience. There's a gentleman there. Thank you very much. If you can introduce yourself and yeah.
Yeah, Panos Sakloglu from Greece. How do you respond to the claim, I do not necessarily share this view, that Germany actually benefited from the crisis, despite the fact that there were the cost of the bailouts? There is this argument there that as a result of the crisis, Germany was considered a safe haven. As a result, the cost of public financing was extremely low. However, the main reason comes from two different sources. One, you have already hinted it. As a result of the crisis, the value of the euro was extremely low, and for an export-oriented country like Germany, this led to huge benefits, and also to the fact that as a result of this inflow of capital to Germany, the cost of capital was substantially lower for the German firms than other firms. For instance, compare, I don't know, Volkswagen and Fiat, for instance, putting, let's say, the periphery economies into a disadvantage. How do you respond to this claim?
I would say you are right. One has to see both sides of the coin. Germany has to bear now much higher risk than before, so it is paid in a way by having some advantages. As you mentioned, there are estimates showing that Germany has gained, even from my institute based in Cologne, saying 45 billion euros as a result of the safe haven status. And you mentioned some other things that may be positive, and you have to balance that. One positive effect is also, from the German point of view, that many people now migrate, skilled persons migrate to the German labor market, and we have gaps in terms of skilled labor, and that helps to prosper Germany. But in turn, this also helps the countries like Slovakia, that are part of the supply chain. And so you're right. Maybe in the German debate, in the German public debate, this part of the story hasn't got the proper space. With regard to the euro, it's not so clear. What is probably clear is the fact that if we had a breakup of the euro in some way, if that happened, that Germany would appreciate, and that we had then a strong problem in the strong German export sector. But it's not so clear if the euro is really undervalued now in terms of purchasing power parity. Because of the existing situations that we have, many countries now pursuing very expansionary monetary policies. It's not so clear if the euro is really undervalued, because the United States pursuing such policies, as well as now Japan and so on. But you are right. Part of the story that Germany could remove production away from the eurozone towards China is based, on the one hand, on the demand management policies that occurred in recent times, also in China, and based on the rather positive situation for Germany with respect to the euro.
So while we now kind of analyzed the roots of the crisis, we went into the impact of the crisis on singular member states like Greece, Germany, and Slovakia. But if we can move one step forward a little bit and look also whether our governments responded effectively and efficiently to the crisis, and whether something should have been done in a different way. And also we could very briefly evaluate the EU's response to the crisis. So I will again go back to our Greek panelists and panelists. I'll ask you what would you do differently if you were in the government in Greece? Do you think it works, or you are trying to? And if you also can then answer the question of the gentleman in the back who asked about the unemployment.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm not sure whether the rest of the audience can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, yeah, I think it's better now. Well, first of all, the tricky issue now in Greece, it's called, I think, social cohesion. And actually, this is, I think, the big challenge that Samaras government now is facing. And social cohesion, I think, is very much also related to the level of sacrifices that already have been made, and of course the level of sacrifices that have to be made in the even in the short term. And okay, I was traveling today, so I don't know what exactly has happened in Bulgaria, but I know that the government has resigned because of protests and because of various social upheavals in the country. So social cohesion, I think, is a big challenge for Samaras government. And this challenge is very much connected with the development, with the developmental measures and policies that are now in the process of being undertaken. And I think that there is a huge effort from the Greek government now in order to keep pace with the various policies that will really make use, let's say, of the reforms already undertaken or are going to be undertaken. So this is the big endeavor now in Greece. From the one side, we have the issue of social cohesion, and on the other hand, we have the solution to the issue, the probable solution, which is the developmental pace that has to be kept in order to keep things in a certain way.
So how would you keep the development pace?
Well, on the other hand, of course, and here I will give you only one figure. Nowadays, unemployment is around 30%, which means unemployment for youth is around 55 to 60%. Eventually, you are talking about if the whole endeavor fails, then we talk about 2 to 3 lost generations. And believe me, it's a huge sacrifice for a country like Greece, which at the end of the day does not have to pay for all the mistakes of this world. So I think that now the challenge is, the challenge now is the developmental policies. This is where the government now focuses on, together with the path of reforms.
And the developmental policies, in what form? Like how, what would you do to improve these developmental policies, to implement them? And
we have let's say three levels of interventions. Which may not seem to be so developmental, but at the end of the day it is the rationalization of expenses, which is very much connected with the overall pace of reforms that are undertaken. Second is the creation of new income, and this may come out of privatization, for example, policies. There is a quite huge endeavor for privatization policy and quite a big effort to attract private investment in Greece nowadays and foreign direct investment. There is also a huge effort in trying to use existing, let's say, resources that Greece has. And at the end of the day, of course, we now also make efforts to capitalize on those economic sectors which seem to have to be of an added value to Greece, like, for example, education, culture, tourism, maritime and shipping industry, and so on and so on. And the third level is, of course, the social networks. In other words, this kind of investment that is needed to be done, and it's absolutely necessary to be done in order to keep social cohesion, which at the end of the day is the precondition for any kind of potential success of this effort.
Thank you very much. So Walter, we can move now to you, and as we discussed already in your previous contribution, you said that there was the downturn of Germany in 2008, late 2009, if I'm not mistaken, and then again there was the growth, and there were like several structural reforms even prior to the crisis which actually accelerated this growth. Would you like to add up something like on Germany, like some kind of the recipe for success and some
maybe
other
no.
things.
Yeah. So maybe there's no real recipe for success because it always depends on the internal conditions. Apart from the fact that we know that you cannot resolve everything with monetary policy, and that structural reforms, as you mentioned, that give incentives for using capital, formation of human capital, etc., will lead to, in the medium and longer term, to success. I mean, that is the recipe, but what we actually did is we transformed the traditional social market economy model, which was more and more characterized since the 1980s with internal flexibility. So Germany was, West Germany became the champion of internal flexibility within firms. So we were well known for having possibilities to of short-time work, as well as flexibility of working time, etc. But after all, this didn't result in lowering unemployment. So we started moving into the 35 hours week in 1985 in the metal and electrical industry, but unemployment rose and rose and rose, despite of the fact that this was tried. And the hard lesson learned was that this is not the way out of the crisis. So we have to implement as well with having rather strong dismissal protection, also more external flexibility. And that happened prior to the crisis in 2005 with well-known Agenda 2010, which was in the Bundestag, in the lower House of Parliament, mentioned by Chancellor Schröder in 2003, but it took 2 years before it was really implemented. And since then, almost immediately since then, the situation improved quite a lot because of the signaling effect of these kind of reforms. And that allowed Germany to combine within its social partnership system a new balance between internal and external flexibility. And when the crisis hit, this was used quite a lot. There was an incentive to use temporary workers. With that, you could circumvent dismissal protection. You created some kind of insider-outsider problem in the labor market, but at the same time, you resolved it because we had a strong increase of employment of long-term or formerly long-term unemployed persons. These reforms really helped these outside of the labor markets to move into the labor market. At the same time, we had to create a so-called low-wage sector, meaning that instead of being unemployed, persons have to work, but at the same time, they get a wage subsidy to have a decent life. And this combination of the renewed German social market economy really helped during the crisis. I mean, Germany was affected specifically. I said fundamentals were okay, economic policy was right and adequate, and we had good luck because we could shift the exports towards Asia. But the flexibilized labor market really did help, and there was the well-designed response to the crisis on the one hand with demand management. So Germany is not totally anti-Keynesian, as some Anglo-Saxons think, but we apply it in the right situation, what the Germans would say. So Germany had the so-called enlightened social market economy at the end of 1960s, early 1970s, when we put Keynesian ideas into the social market economy. That led, however, in the longer term to problems of rising public debt levels, but nevertheless, German economists accepted that if you have a demand-side problem only, as we had it in Germany in the crisis, you can use this kind of policy. And Germany was actually having a 4% of GDP stimulus program in 2 years, over 2 years, 2009, 2010, which stimulated the economy and contributed to the improved situation. But at the same time, this was combined with credible consolidation policy because we, in August 2009, the so-called debt brake was implemented, that in the medium term, public debt has to decline, and in 2016 the structural deficit must be only 0.35%, and we reached that level already now in 2012. So that seems to work fine, this combination, at least in the German case.
So this works very well in your case, but here is another example in like Slovakia, where the crisis has been not that severe either, and Slovakia was quite able to weather the crisis quite well. But unlike Germany, in Slovakia, unemployment rate is still very high, and the unemployment rate is very high. Martin, what do you think? What hasn't been done well, and what would you suggest to do in order to decrease unemployment in Slovakia?
The most important thing, the reason why the effect of these anti-crisis measures were not as successful as was expected, was that they were targeted at the domestic economy, and the main problem was decreasing export. So because the export didn't increase because our partners had problem, so that's why it was not possible to revive the economy. So I would say one of the solutions is we have to find a way how to revive the local economy, to take this high number of unemployed, and the way have to revive this local demand. So I think this is the most important factor. There are examples of how to do it, which are mentioned in the book. I want to because of the time, and also some other measures where I think that they were also counterproductive. I would mention one which was one famous measure, which was, for example, subsidies for the buying of new car when you liquidate the old car. This is of
cash
course
for clunkers, right?
Yes, that's right. This is one of the examples of cooperations among Germany, because when we introduce this subsidy, we also help our other countries which producing the cars, for example, Czech Republic. But because of this effort was coordinated in Germany, so it was not so bad. But at the other hand, when you imagine what was the effect of this crisis, the real effect was that you motivate someone to get rid of his savings on a new car, because cars are very expensive, and you motivate to get rid of some service which he already has, and instead he could use these savings for something else. For example, you could use to boost the local economy by paying for car service, or he can make investments to change this profession, or to be more flexible, to react more flexibly. And of course, there were also some measures which I think they are quite positive, and these were measures to boost to help the small and medium enterprise, to promote the self-employment and etc.
So as you can hear, 3 different countries, 3 different approaches to the crisis. There are like three different states and severity of the crisis. And if I may just pass the floor on Vít, who has been like a silent observer and listener for a little while, to comment on all these things and to actually take the floor and express his views.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say when my colleagues and I tried to look at what it takes for a government to respond properly to the economic crisis, it's actually not been very easy to find out what it is. But I would point to 3 factors. One is political stability. You can be pretty sure where there's been a lot of change in government, the country has not done well economically. The first one. Secondly, flexible labor markets. I think Germany can serve as an example. But again, if you look at Norway, for example, or Malta, these are countries which have a high degree of flexibility in the labor market, and they responded well to the crisis, because it was relatively easy to hire and fire people, and the economy can react during a downturn. And thirdly, I would say a healthy financial sector. It's been mentioned that Slovakia had its own reforms in the 1990s. That is true. Also, the Czech Republic. had its own crisis in the 1990s, and paradoxically, these previous crises in the 1990s led to restructuring of the banks, recapitalization, improved regulation, and that put these countries in a better position when the big crisis hit in the 2000s. The same goes for Finland, which had its own financial crisis in the early 1990s, but ended up with a healthy financial sector. The same goes, of course, for Germany with a relatively healthy financial sector too. So this has been an important precondition for a country to deal well with the financial crisis.
So would you call it these are the lessons learned also, or
perhaps yes?
Or would you like to add more lessons learned from the crisis?
I could add some more, yes. Interestingly enough, healthy public finances has not been an important or not a clear factor of a success in dealing with the crisis. Because if you look at Spain, for example, its budget deficit was very low until the end of the last decade. The problem was in Spain a huge bubble in the private sector. So the private debt was really high, and that caused the banking sector to go into trouble. The same goes for Ireland, for example. So it's interesting when you look at the crisis. Healthy public finances by themselves are not necessarily a sign that the country is going to respond well to a crisis.
The other panelists, would you like to actually take the floor and add up some more lessons learned that the crisis has taught you and has your countries taught? And then also, like, is there anything that we can learn from each other, do you think, to prevent the future crisis? Like, we can start from reverse order, like we can start from Slovakia, Germany, and Greece this time?
I think there are plenty of lessons which we can learn from each other. For example, on the countries which have the debt crisis, we can learn that how important it is to have the balanced budget. This is one of the things, and there are also several things. The Slovakia also one of the important measures at the beginning was to try to make the huge public investment, because they believe that in the Keynesian style that it will boost the economy. But the economy was it boosted only to 1 year maybe, and then not. So the result was not so good. And at the beginning, the Slovakia, the level of indebtedness was very, very low, on only 30% of GDP. And after the crisis, it increased on 50% almost on GDP. So the lesson is that the governments have to keep the balanced budgets.
We have also the question from the audience, I suppose, or yeah. If you can just put the mic on, gentleman over there. Please, you can.
Yes, well, I just wanted to ask a question which Mr. Valentovic started to answer, because from the discussion, not only in this panel, also in previous, one has a feeling that until 2008 we were living in a wonderful European economic heavens, and then suddenly crisis struck. Thanks. So my question was, what was the level of public debt in Germany, Greece, Slovakia, and Czech Republic in 2007?
Slovakia was about 30% of GDP, the public debt.
And Greece?
Which was considered very low.
I think Greece was 120.
Germany?
Slightly above 60% in Germany. And then during the crisis, up to 82%.
Yeah, in Czechia, it was, I think, around 40%, if I remember correctly. I actually have the figures here somewhere.
Yeah, the problem was... you want to...
Yeah, I'm not an economist, I'm a political scientist, but for me, 120% public debt, it's not a beginning of crisis, it's almost end of crisis for me.
No, you have Japan with 200.
Yeah, but with slightly stronger
it's
stronger
completely-
economy.
No, Japan cannot compare to other countries because of specifically only Japanese persons hold that debt, while the point is that in Europe other countries hold that debt. So it's much more related to the markets. In Japan, really 100% are held by Japanese citizens, and they will not move out of the country. The problem in all other countries is that the public debt is held by other countries. In Germany, it's around 50% held by other countries, and so you depend on the international markets then, and that's a really big difference.
No, you can,
And you cannot compare Japan to the rest of the world for that reason.
No, I only wanted to say the following. I want to demonstrate that there are a series of numerical indicators that can be easily be employed, let's say, or can easily be deployed for under various angles and perspectives in order to serve various purposes. So
That's right.
by this I want to say, and this is what I wanted to contribute to the lessons learned, that especially in the case for Greece, the numerical indicators, the economic indicators were simply misleading. Because from the one side you had, let's say, this 120%, but on the other hand you have had at least, I think, 4.5 to 5% annual growth. And you had other various absolute numbers that were really demonstrating a prosperous economy. But at the end of the day, the crisis hit Greece for a lot of reasons. And in my opinion, those reasons were not economic only. I don't put the leverage. I don't say that the economic ones were less important than the other one. But in my opinion, the crisis in Greece has deeper roots. And those deeper roots are connected with the level of political development and a series of characteristics that have been entangled into the nature of the political development in Greece in the last 30 years. This is what I wanted to stress. And of course, related to this, and here I will stop, is also the social elements which are interconnected with the type and the nature of political development in Greece in the last 30 years. So if I want to justify or to see the Greek crisis, I will not just say that, oh, you have 120%, then this means that you are, because I can use a lot of numbers to counter down your argument. I would go back to the 80s.
Do we have any other questions or immediate comments from the audience? Please.
The big hit in popularized economics of the last 10 years, it was a book by Carmen Reinhardt and Kenneth Rogoff. This time is different. 800 Years of Financial Folly is the title of the book. And I think that the title says everything. It's very nice to look at history. History is not repeating itself, however you can learn in several instances, in my opinion. To expect that we will avoid financial crisis in the future because we will take measure 1 or measure 2 is simply a fallacy. To reply to your comment there that Japan will avoid it in the end, it will be something that has not happened in any country of the world under any circumstance, and especially in an aging society like Japan.
But Japan has not avoided.
So far, there is no bankruptcy.
Has not avoided already. Has not been bankrupt yet.
No. That's precisely what I'm saying. I'm just projecting into the future. There is no precedent like this. Nowhere near this. Finally, if I can say something as a conclusion, is perhaps some people may call me unreconstructed Keynesian for this one. I think that people who are reading the general theory must read it, the entire book, not only selected pages. And what is happening there in several European countries, and this was mostly in Greece, however, not only in Greece, in several other countries as well. What it says is to use public policies as anti-cyclical instruments. It does not say that you must spend relentlessly, irrespective of the part of the economic cycle where you are in. The big problem with Greece was precisely this. And Pantelis hinted at it, however, I think it is the other way around. We had for so many years high growth rates, and nevertheless, in several of these years, we had accumulated, we were creating primary deficits, or when we were creating primary surpluses, they were very small, taking into account, first of all, the level of our debt, and secondly, the growth rate of the economy. If there is a lesson that can be learned from the Greek crisis, it is primarily this one. I can understand that I agree with Pantelis that there are several other aspects of political economy that are associated with this behavior. This may be the causal factors. However, in the end of the day, and irrespective of all the other factors, this is a lesson that can be learned for the future. But to expect that we will avoid such crises in the future.
Any other comments or any other lessons you learned in your countries, like during the crisis?
We don't want any other lessons in our country.
So there are no lessons. So I would like just to.
We had enough lessons.
If there are enough lessons, let's just ask another question, which we have to reply very briefly and quickly, and that is about fiscal consolidation and the growth. This I have been listening to this like a lot during this conference. There were several voices raised that the fiscal consolidation is very counterproductive to the growth, and some also EU sources are saying that actually like the fiscal consolidation is very pro-growth friendly. So can you give us your comments on this? Like I will start from Vít on my right hand here. I don't know.
The answer is I don't know. When we had a look at the different countries' experience, according to the chapters in the book, it seems that each country has its own mixture of stimulus and austerity and structural reforms. The complexity of these measures is such that we have not been able to find out what has really worked. It's clear that each country is in a different situation, and each country must choose its own mixture, but I do not know what the answer is at the general level. What can be said, I think, is that there are bad austerities and there are bad stimuluses. But I'll end at that.
But do you have any idea on how to actually get back to growth and how far we are from growth?
Well,
what does your book suggest?
Well, I think the authors agree, and I agree too, that we need to reform. We need structural reforms. We need much more flexible labor markets. I think it's recognized that a flexible labor market helps economic growth. We need to deregulate our services, including energy, utilities, telecoms. We need cross-border commerce in the European Union. We need better IT infrastructure to stimulate enterprise. We need much smarter healthcare. Basically, the answer to me is not in the austerity versus stimulus debate, but it's it's a long-term answer in relation to structural reforms.
Thank you very much. Can we move to Martin?
As I mentioned at the beginning, the high growth rate of Slovakia, it was the result of some reforms, the structural reforms, but also the austerity. So this could be the proof that it could help by the growth. But and also too much spendings, it is not very could not lead to the healthy economy, because it could lead to the debt crisis. But on the other hand, it is not only important to invest or not, but also the characteristics of this this investment, because it doesn't mean that you get rid of the government, that you have no cost and you will have growth. So it could be the balance. But very important is to not make too much borrowing from indebtedness. So these have to be taken in mind.
Pantelis?
I have already I have already said in my previous intervention that rationalization of expenses is part of a development process. So I have already interconnected the two cycles. On the other hand, mere fiscal measures targeting the same people, let's say without managing to expand the tax basis and with other, or to combine it with other clever, let's call them measures, then that may create difficulties at the end.
And Lothar, if I...
So I will say is a clear it depends. Very clearly it depends because it depends on the environment. As he said, also all the figures depend on the environment, so you have to think about the other figures when you look at an economy, not just at one figure. And the same is true when you look at the idea of austerity. Austerity is a bad term because austerity can mean different things. You can either cut taxes or you can increase taxes or you consolidate. You can consolidate in different ways. You can combine it with structural reforms. It very much depends on the way you do it. And there are clear, rather clear results also on that issue, that if you cut taxes, this has a better possibility to lead to consolidation and is not self-defeated than in a different situation. And I can tell you, you just have to look at aggregate demand, at total demand of an economy, which consists of consumption, investment, net exports, meaning exports minus imports, and government expenditure. And what you do is when you pursue austerity is you cut down government expenditure in a sense. So this falls. And if you are in an environment which allows for compensation for this fall by the other components of aggregate demand, meaning by you create an environment with structural reforms for increased investment at the same time. So increased investment may compensate for the fall of governmental expenditure. Then the idea of that at the same time when you cut public expenditure, you may have to buy these things by yourself, so private consumption may increase for that reason. And if you are in an environment, as Germany has been in the good times, when we consolidated after the reforms of 2004-5 ongoing, we were in an environment, and so we were benefiting from the growth rates in other countries because when we cut public expenditure at the same time, our exports could improve, which compensated for the cut in public expenditure. So it very much depends
so
on
the main
environment.
conclusion of the panel is it depends.
No. At this moment, the clear message is it's much more difficult because if all countries have to consolidate at the same time, when interest rates are already very low, you cannot stimulate the other components of demand. But the problem is, coming back to Carmen Reinert and Professor Rogoff, is that you have this level of 90% of GDP. And the statistical analysis of 800 years demonstrates that, at least in statistical terms, when you are above that level, you have negative effects on economic growth. And you cannot pursue Keynesian policies when you are in a recession because of the negative effects this has on your credibility. And you have to pay higher interest rates because of being much more risky from the point of view of investors. So you have to do the consolidation measures despite of the fact that you have this problem that it will lead in the short term to a worse situation. That's the point I think that's being said by most German economists, the two persons that spoke yesterday from Germany and today, they have similar opinions because the German view can be summarized by the research institutes saying that the strategy of growth-promoting reforms linked with the credible consolidation of public budget remains the best way of restoring confidence in the sustainability of public finance in the crisis countries. That is the message of the 5 large research institutes, and the problem with stimulus measures is simply, and that's the most simple Keynesian position, which is wrong from the German point of view, is saying it is a wrong, German economists would say it is a wrong target to end any recession as soon as possible. And sometimes you see that in the Financial Times or in other press cuts arguing like that. In Germany, you would say, okay, just stimulating the economy is just a flash in the pan. And at the end of the of this, you will not have increased economic growth, which is sustainable, but you just have higher public debt, and that is not the solution in our view.
So can we take this as the final comment? The Lothar's comment can we take as a final comment, or is there any urgent need by other panelists to add something on that, and then we can close the panel? Or even like from the audience, if the audience has any like final comment that they would like to say or like to raise any concern, like we are here like for the next 2 minutes.
And maybe I will add very briefly about these topics of consolidation or not consolidation. It depends. Maybe it is good to look each country by a different way. Because some countries maybe need the consolidation. Then in other countries, you cannot just to save cost at anything. So
yeah.
So this is the maybe the
May
answer.
I add one point on that?
Generalize.
Yes.
Because we discussed yesterday the point of rebalancing. Which is important, definitely, yeah. But there's a new study, 3 months old, by the European Commission asking what would happen if Germany stimulated demand, and the result would be an increase. So if Germany increased demand by 1%, the effect on the crisis countries would be an increase of GDP by 0.05%. So that means it's a very, very low increase only of this increase of demand in Germany. And that means you cannot just simply resolve the problems by rebalancing in terms of that Germany just increases demand, at least if you accept these kind of studies, or econometric studies by the European Commission. And so it can be part of the story. So I would entirely agree that Germany has to pursue, as Witt says, structural reforms which stimulate investment and decrease savings. All that would lead to less current account surpluses in Germany and could help other countries. But that is good for Germany and good for the other countries, but not to an extent that they can lift themselves out of the crisis. They have to do at the same time structural reforms.
Right, panelists, you wanted to say something very quickly. You have 60 seconds.
I would like to add in the discussion the human dimension. And the need to safeguard the social networks in the field. And I would like also to say that although I don't strongly disagree with the outcomes and the conclusions of the fellow researchers, I should insist on the fact that this short-term negative impact should really take into consideration human lives at the end of the day.
Wait, can we take this as the last word, or you would like to say something additional? So I think that this has been an exciting panel, and like we had like 4 different speakers from 4 different countries, and what we can clearly say is that one size doesn't fit all. We really have to take the approach which is varied, differentiated, and to look into the causes and the roots of the crisis, to go like how it has impacted the concrete member states, and to tailor-make the solutions accordingly. I'm not going to try to summarize this panel. It would be too difficult. There have been like too many ideas, so I will just leave it on you to absorb it, to get back to your homes and to enjoy the evening. I just would like to say, or to steal one idea from the gentleman who spoke at the beginning of this conference. It was Ambassador Franz van Dellen at the first panel, when he said that every crisis in Europe always ends with more Europe, never with less Europe. And if it is so, I think we need more discussions of this sort. We need to meet more often and to meet in different capitals rather than just in Brussels, because only then we can bring Europe really closer to its citizens. And it really might seem like a cliche, but it is an important element of creating a true ownership of the EU policies among the European citizens. So I'm very, very happy that we actually were able to meet here in Bratislava, and I hope this is just the start of the conferences of this sort in Bratislava, and I thank you, and please join me in thanking the panelists, organizers, partners, and all supporters who made this event possible. Thank you very much.